Okay,
Okay.
so we want to welcome everyone to the Women Are Worthy show. I wanted to do a show with Mark Woolsey, and we wanted to talk about basically tonight's show. We're talking about race. Basically, we want to talk about race relations, and I have Mark Woolsey on. So I'm glad that everyone is tuning in. Welcome. So, Mark, you and I have been talking off social media, personally, one on one.
Right.
So a lot of things have been bothering me as an African American woman, and you're a Caucasian man. So let's get right into it. We're going to be respectful with our opinions. We're going to agree to disagree. We may go back and forth, and that's quite okay. I want you guys, if you guys are tuned in, let me know what it sounds like. Okay. I want to make sure we're getting good sound here. Because I know there's 4 people on right now, so I'm waiting for their feedback. But let's continue. So, Mark,
Yes, ma'am.
let's talk about why did we decide to do this?
Well, I'm not going to speak for you, but from my standpoint, well, I think we're in agreement on it. I think that we saw a need for an honest, open-ended, no holds barred discussion. Race for a long time has been the elephant in the room, the 800-pound gorilla that everybody tried to ignore. And because of that, I don't think we've made nearly as much progress as we could have had we decided to bring things out into the open. And as sad and tragic as George Floyd and other recent events have been, it seems like it's forced the discussion into the open, and now there's somewhat more willingness to talk honestly about the fraction or the friction points, I guess is what I'm trying to say, in the relationship between different folks in America. And I think that's healthy. I think that's going to be uncomfortable at times for me. Anyway, you tell me what you think, but I think sometimes uncomfortable is good, and getting out of your comfort zone is good. And I think broadly, I think if more people got out of their comfort zone more often, that life would be a bit better on this planet, because people tend to get into their zones and into their bubbles, and they don't try new things. And this certainly is trying something new for me. I've never done anything like this. So
Okay,
I'm
you ready for me?
sure. Yeah, go right ahead.
I am sick and tired of when I post Black Lives Matters, I gotta freaking see White Lives Matters. I'm sick of it. Okay. And the reason why I'm sick of it, let me explain. All lives matters. I guess definitely not. I guess all lives matter. Asians, Latinos, all lives matters. But right now we're having an issue with Black men and women being gunned down. And when I say Black Lives Matter, it's because of what's happening right now, why I'm saying Black Lives Matter. When you see Black Lives Matter as a white man, how does that affect you? Or how do you feel? And I want you to be honest about this because we're all talking, you know? How do you feel about this when you see Black Lives Matter?
At first it felt just a bit militant. I don't say that in a real accusatory way, but once I started listening, uh, a different narrative emerged for me. And if I could, I'd like to tell the story that the spiritual leader at our church did, or the parable or the analogy where a house catches on fire and the firefighters show up and they start to get their hoses out and attack the blaze, and um, a guy wanders up who's a neighbor and says, I can see that house matters, but what about my house? My house down the street matters too. Why don't you pay some attention to it? And the firefighter said, because this is the house that's on fire. So I firmly believe that, your house is on fire. All lives do matter, but right now, this is what needs to be paid attention to.
Do you
And
understand why the African American community, why we're angry, why we're pissed off, why we're disgusted, why we don't want to take it anymore?
I think so. I think that, well, here's the way I see it. I think it's a perfect storm. You've got COVID-19. which has kept people cooped up more than usual. You've got the economic effects, which have fallen disproportionately on African Americans because they tend to be there tends to be a greater percentage of them that are frontline or service workers, and now you've got a horrible series of unwarranted killings and other violence being perpetrated against African Americans. So to me, it's all kind of come together in this maelstrom, if you will, and people are looking at it. And I think finally, white folks are looking at it and going, you know, this cannot stand. This should not stand. You know, so I look upon this as a fulcrum of history. I think we're going to look back at 2020 in maybe 50 years, and we'll think of it as people do now of 1968, when Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King were assassinated, when the war in Vietnam was raging, when there a series of major events happened in 1968. And I think we'll look back on 2020 as a fulcrum point in history in 50 years. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, but it certainly is interesting and enlightening to have a front row seat as history is being made.
So as a white man, I don't know how your entire family feels. Is your entire family in the same the opinion of yours? Like, do they all agree with what you're doing? Meaning that you can understand, show compassion, empathy. Do they feel that way?
Yeah. I think my wife certainly does. She's an old school liberal like me from the late 60s, early 70s time frame. My kids, you know, I raised them to be colorblind, and you know.
Wait. What do you mean colorblind? What does that mean?
All right, I raised them. All right, let me rephrase that.
No. Don't rephrase, because I want this to be a honest communication with us. Don't want you to be apologetic. You don't have to apologize, but I just want to know what you mean about colorblind.
That they should treat all people according to the content of their character, not the color of their skin.
Okay. Now, were you raised that way?
No, I was not. I had to unlearn a lot of stuff, and let me be somewhat diplomatic about it. My extended family, my nuclear family to some extent, but particularly my extended family, was not enlightened. And I heard a lot of talk as a child that I just automatically accepted. Just 1 second. What? What? She's really concerned that she has. Okay. We're live here. So
when you said you heard talk, were you talking about, like, did you grow up hearing the N-word?
Yeah, plenty of times.
Wow.
Plenty of times. My family is from, this is my dad's side of the family, mind you. That it comes from Southern Illinois, and Southern Illinois, to those who maybe are, you know, in Georgia or other places, that's as every bit Southern as Alabama is. I swear to God, that's, you know, that's the way it is there. And those attitudes were formed there, and those attitudes have persisted over time. I think maybe there's been some moderation, but and if my family is on, so be it. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but at a reunion a few years ago, I heard the opinion that Trayvon Martin had it coming to him. And I'm thinking, like, wait a minute, George, what was his last name?
Floyd.
No, George Zimmer,
Zimmerman.
The guy that faced off with Trayvon Martin. George Zimmer had a gun, and Trayvon Martin had Skittles. That doesn't sound like a very equal distribution of weapons to me. And I just could not understand that attitude. I got up and I left the room for a while. Had it been today, I would have unleashed, politely, but I would have unleashed my own take on it. That here was a kid walking home after buying candy, and a vigilante challenged him and then shot him for no good reason whatsoever. But that's not the attitude that some folks in my family had.
Well, we
My
have a
family's a good
question for
family.
you. We have a
Pardon me?
question. We
Yeah.
have a question for you. But before I get to that question, someone wants to know at what point in your life did you make the shift? Before we go there,
Okay.
again, we're having a conversation. There's no way, being who I am, where someone says that Trayvon Martin had it coming to him, that that's a good family. That's not a good family. For someone to say
Well,
that that's not a good, that's just
I,
my
I
opinion.
respect your opinion.
Right,
I
that's my
respect your
opinion,
opinion.
you know.
Yeah.
But for me, what I'm noticing on Facebook, a lot of people are posting things similar to that regarding the killings that happened recently. That if a police, I was so shocked because I'm starting to find out who people really are now. Because someone posted something on Facebook stating that if the police officer tells you to stop and you run and you get shot, oh well. And
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not quite understanding that, and I'm not going to get into the whole thing about the police officers. And I'm just looking at a guy who's running away from you. If you didn't tase him, he didn't have a gun. So what do we do? So let's go back to that question that was posed to you. At what point in your life did you make the shift?
There was no point. It was more of a continuum. It was getting away from home as I went to college and meeting some black folks and having them in classes. I grew up in a lily white suburb. We had maybe two or three people of color in my whole school. So there was no opportunity to get some real life experience and counteract those messages that I was getting. So away to college. Then as I got into the professional world of broadcasting, being a journalist, meeting folks, sometimes socializing with them, white and black both, getting involved in professional organizations, and just keeping my ears open. As things mounted through the years in terms of the killings, the mistreatment, the microaggressions, the subtle forms of racism. My eyes opened, but they opened gradually. There was no one major, lightning bolt or epiphany that happened.
So, I mean, do you have any questions for me? Because we're having this conversation. It's not me interviewing you, it's us having a discussion because,
Sure, sure.
I've been very angry and I had to literally like calm down because of the stuff that I've been seeing on Facebook. And I'm always glass half full. I'm a cheerful person, happy person, but I'm a human being and I'm a Black woman in America. So I would be crazy not saying that a lot of things doesn't offend me. So do you have anything you want to ask me?
Well,
being a
let
Black
me
woman?
let me ask you this, since you mentioned anger, and anger can be useful sometimes. Uh, how do you plan to channel that anger as you look at as Oprah's show posed the question a couple of weeks ago? Where do we go from here?
Well, we need to have more discussions like this. But I think it needs to be more honest because I think people tend to be politically correct because now the minute you say something, people want to attack you. And I think we need to respect each other's opinion. But I need to see more education from white America. And what I mean about that, in America, we have to know your history. So when I sit down and I talk to someone and say, "Hey, do you know a black person invented the stoplight?" And the street light, and if I keep going through the inventions, it's almost like they don't know and they don't have to know because there is white privilege. Let's be honest, it's out there. People don't want to talk about it. And when you mention it to most white people, it's like they're apologizing. No, it is what it is. Because I love all people, but we have to sit down and have an honest discussion from slavery on down. We have to have an honest discussion.
Yeah, and I think it's been glossed over. I mean, you look at the history books now. I don't know what they teach nowadays, but back when I was a kid, it was along the lines of folks were kidnapped in Africa, brought over. There was slavery. Slavery was a major or the predominant cause of the Civil War, and then the slaves were freed, and then there was Reconstruction, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember the book saying too much about Jim Crow. for example, and indentured servitude, because some, according to the reading that I've done, and I need to do more, some uh, people of color were forced into pseudo-slavery, periods of indentured servitude. And I'm sure this is nothing that, that you're not familiar with, but I only read about some of this kind of stuff a couple of years ago. And that further cemented my attitude that what's going on now has to be the end of it. 400 years of slavery, mistreatment, Jim Crow, subtle forms of and not so subtle forms of discrimination. Look at the poll tax and things like that. That it's time to stop it, and it's time to stop it now if we can. If not now, soon, as soon as we can manage that task.
So we have Juneteenth and we have Black History Month. What have you done personally to educate yourself prior to this happening on the African American, what we've done, what we've accomplished, other than Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks? What have you done to educate yourself and maybe your friends?
Not as much as I should have. I remember as a kid reading a book about George Washington Carver that I ordered from the library at my school, and just thinking, wow, this guy was, this guy was a dude. He was smart. He created a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, as I guess I became an adult, I did not follow that up to the extent that I should have. I don't know why, to tell you the truth. But I think that would be good for me to do. I think that would be good for white America to do. To look at Black history from a broader and deeper perspective, and as you say, go beyond Rosa Parks and MLK I'm having a senior moment. The major leaders. One thing that I think has been helpful for me is watching. Going to the movies and watching things based on actual events, like Hidden Figures, which detailed the contributions that 3 African American women made to the space program. Selma, which vividly showed, I thought, in a very, very dramatic and compelling way, the march from Selma to Montgomery back in 1965. And as a matter of fact, maybe this is a bit of a digression, but I see a parallel here. You look at, you saw Selma, I'm sure, and you see the images of Bull Connor in Birmingham, the police chief, unleashing dogs and fire hoses and nightsticks on demonstrators, a lot of them very young, rather young demonstrators, teenagers, and you see a reaction shot of somebody in white middle America just recoiling in horror. I think that the George Floyd shooting brought the same reaction, and that's also a linchpin, if you will, in the modern civil rights movement, much as those images coming out of Alabama. I think you can look at that and argue that there was a groundswell, and that helped to propel passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. So I really think we're at one of those turning points, as we were in 1963, 64, 65. So we'll see. We will see what happens.
So if you had the power and you were given 3 things that would help what's going on now, what 3 things would you like to implement that would help change the culture and the framework of what's happening right now?
I can think of 2 right off the bat. One is equally funding schools so that Black kids and white kids have the same opportunities. Across America, schools are primarily supported by property taxes in most states. And what that means is if you live in an area where homes are not as highly valued and the tax rates reflect that and the tax collections reflect that, I think that's part of the problem. There are other problems that go with the difference in opportunity, but that's one. The second thing is I would mandate sensitivity training, perhaps on all sides in schools, and a more open discussion on things like diversity. Now, that may very well be going on now. I don't know to what extent the schools are dipping into that at this point, but certainly some kind of diversity, sensitivity training, and also conflict de-escalation. I think that's something that would be great to be to be implemented at a fairly early age. Maybe junior high, maybe, well, high school probably would be a little bit better because kids' brains mature quite a lot in a few years. But I would like to see those two things done. I'm trying to think of, gosh, I guess, a third thing would be to just, greater sensitivity in the workplace. Because let's face it, as people with jobs, sometimes we spend more time with our coworkers than we do with our families. We commute to work for 2 hours. Now I'm semi-retired, but you commute to work for an hour or two, you spend 8 hours with your coworkers. By the time you get home, dinner is ready. And then fairly quickly after that, folks are heading off to bed or to study or whatever. So, I think workplace sensitivity would be that would be another area where folks, I think, should have or could have honest conversations about things instead of tiptoeing around issues.
So what do you think about now that they're taking down the Confederate? We're in Georgia, for those of you tuning in. I don't know where you guys are from, but they're taking down the flag and some statues. And I'm hearing for some that the statue should not be taken down and the flag should not be taken down. Because there's no right or wrong answer coming from you, because it's your opinion and it's how you feel. What is your opinion about the flags being taken down in government places, and also about the statues?
I think you have to look at it on somewhat of a case-by-case basis. Let me give you an example. The Confederate battle flag that was on the Georgia state flag, or at least on a portion of the Georgia state flag, until about maybe 2003, 2004, something like that, people were yapping about it being a sacrilege to take away from Confederate heritage and change this flag, and that this was somehow a violation of history and heritage. I did some research on it, and the Georgia legislature added the Confederate flag to the state flag in 1956, which more or less was can I say this, more or less an FU at the feds and Brown versus Board of Education, and federal troops being sent in to escort kids to high school in Little Rock. I think that was a direct attack on what the feds were trying to do and what black folks were trying to do. I think if a statue was put up immediately after the war and it really was to honor war heroes, and you cannot find or maybe link it to necessarily intimidation of black folks, then maybe that could stand. But anything after, let's say, Reconstruction, that essentially, as folks were put back into a pseudo form of slavery, if you have symbols that were erected to intimidate people, then maybe those should go. So I sort of split down the middle on that.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you my answer, because I'm not pussyfooting around it. I'm not pussyfooting around it. I'm not trying to be politically correct. I'm going to give my opinion, okay? So, because I'm not worried about how I come across, whatever. This is my show, and I'm going to say what I want to say.
Sure thing.
So, what people don't understand, I understand that we had the war against the North and the South. But what people don't understand, and I want white people to understand this. When we see that, that's a painful reminder of slavery. I understand with certain generals and certain whatever leads, all that in the South, and I'm a Northerner, okay? But it doesn't matter. I'm still a human being. So when you see things like that, it's a painful reminder. When I see a Confederate flag, when I see a statue that represents Civil War, I imagine in my head a slave being beaten, because when I see that, I remember Roots when they chopped off Kunta Kinte's foot because he wouldn't say his name is Toby, and that was indicative. That was Alex Haley's family's history. So
Right.
for me, I can't speak for everyone else, and I've been living in the South for a while. But whenever I see a Confederate flag, or I see a statue, knowing that they wanted to keep the Civil War, i.e., slavery, just for me, I just get this flashback. I just see a master, a white man, hitting a slave in the back with a whip. That's what I see. I see it's painful for me. I didn't live that, but in my ancestors, again, I'm Jamaican and Cuban, but still, we were dropped off in the islands and things like that. So that's what I see. I can't speak for anyone else. That's what I see every time I see it. From the minute I landed in Georgia, that's what I see.
Okay. I understand perfectly, and I agree that you can equate the Confederate flag to black folks with the Nazi flag, the Nazi swastika to folks in Germany. I think, and Jewish folks in particular. So I can easily see that connection, but I guess I'm having a little difficulty with statues being that much of a hot button point for black folks, and maybe you could educate me a little bit more.
Because you have, and I'm going to use it, because you have that white privilege, you don't understand. Because here you mentioned something which was really important. There's no, in Germany, there isn't anything that there isn't a statue of Hitler, there isn't a statue of any of his Nazi people that was running around and doing horrendous things to the Jewish community. Nothing. The SWAT stickers have been pulled down, all of that stuff. So I don't understand how we can go into another country, fight that war because of all the horrible things that happened, and we can't do that here. And I don't mean first to fight a war. What I'm trying to say is how we can't be that compassionate. Okay, let me read some of the comments. Someone said, we also need to separate what people do from what they are. For example, we all are created in God's image, but we all can also make terrible choices. We can change our choice, but not how we were created to say that it's a bad family that says they deserve it, places emphasis on the family, and not the teaching is bad. Change the teaching and actions will change. So I get that. Yes, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. So, yeah. Now, then we have another comment. Just let me read another comment. Another comment says we need to separate. And what that person means is we need to separate. That means black people need to have their own, like they did in Rosewood, like they did in Tulsa. That's what they're talking about. What is your comment about that?
About you cut out a little bit. What about Tulsa and Rosewood?
No, someone said someone's comment here was we need to separate. So I'm explaining what their comment means, where black people went to Tulsa. We had Tulsa all by ourselves. We separated, or we were separated, and also in Rosewood, Florida. So what are your thoughts about separation?
Separation right now?
Yeah.
Boy, I don't know. I know that there is sentiment for that. I don't know how much. I just don't know. I don't know how much good it would do. I mean, look at the schools. They have resegregated over the past few decades. And I don't think that that's a good thing. I think that there should be a mix and there should be diversity in all schools, whether you're in Northeast Cobb, as I am, or whether you're in South Central LA. I mean, I just really believe that. And I believe that all schools should be funded equally so that everybody has an equal shot at opportunity and learning and being mentored and getting the training that they need. So I'm not sure. There's certainly nothing that would prevent it. I'm just not sure that would be something that would be for the ultimate good.
Now, mind you, I'm not saying, I'm just reading comments. I didn't say whether I agree. No. I'm just reading comments.
Right, that's true. You didn't agree. You didn't. You
just reading comments. Yeah, because I want it to be a world, I'm still in my bubble area where I want everyone to love each other. I want everyone to, the unicorn world. That's where I'm from. But I think we
Right.
have to start respecting it. I think once we respect ourselves, then we should start respecting other people. And
Mhm.
we
Mhm.
have to figure out a way how to make this work because we only have one world, but I'm just letting you
Sure.
know, I'm seeing comments from so many white people that they're posting stuff and it's so disrespectful. And it's the people I never expected because I am seeing people who just never left Georgia, never left the world, out of the country, so they don't have that diversity, or they lived amongst Black people, but the Black people, I was told, knew their place. So you don't tell a Northern girl like me that Black people knew their place, okay? But I hear things like that. I just think, and like someone just posted, I don't agree with separating. That won't fix it. Look at the Indians on reservations. They're having lots of issues being separated. So that's what someone just posted. I think we have to work on this now because now that we have the COVID, we have a lot of things going on. Tempers are flaring. We have to sit down and have this honest conversation, whether it's with someone who's a Nazi, whether, one of those guys who don't believe that Black people need to be here, whether it's with a KKK person, we need to have a conversation. We have to figure it out. You don't have to like me, but you're damn sure gonna respect me. Okay. Well, you don't have to like me. And that's how I look at it. And it's angering me because I have to talk to my interns who are young kids. They don't know why people don't like them, why this is happening, why people that look like them are dying. I'm now getting them to a place where not all police officers are bad because look, I can't brag enough about my Kennesaw and Ackworth police officers, right? But there are other officers out there that are doing horrible things. So I had someone talking to me about, well, let's not talk about officers killing or white people killing Black people. Let's talk about Black on Black crime. You know what? We're not talking about Black on Black crime right now. We're talking about people being gunned down. I understand what you're saying, but you know what? That's not your place right now. That is not your place.
Yeah, I guess my feeling is black on black crime is if, I live in a neighborhood of Black folks and I break in and
Mark, I
steal.
can't hear you. I can't hear you.
You can? Okay. All right. Let me get closer. All right.
Yeah.
Better? Okay. I guess my feeling is we're talking about two different issues. If we live in a predominantly Black neighborhood and somebody breaks in and steals my big screen TV, that's not a hate crime. That's just crime. But, officers gunning down Black people without provocation, that's an entirely different thing. That's a crime of hate. That's a crime of, just people. And it's human nature, and I have a good family, but I think they feel victim, as a lot of people do, to that human tendency of wanting to have somebody else that they can put down so that they feel better about themselves. And I think that very well is, and I can't be in the minds of police officers, but I think there's a certain percentage of that goes along with a certain number of people that are cops. Plus, and this is a different issue, I'm against the militarization of the police. They've gotten all this, gear. Remember the movie RoboCop back 30, 40 years ago? Yeah, where, this highly mechanized and super robot fighting. It almost feels like we're in the era of RoboCop now. And it just, I decry the militarization of the police because you go back 20 or 30 years, there was at least a push for more community policing and engaging people, not going back to the old Irish cop on the beat, but creating more of a community feel, and we're all in this together. And I'm with the police. I'm not here to oppress you. I'm here to help you. And it seems like in recent years, attitudes of hardening, and we've gotten away from that. And I regret that.
All right. Well, let me read some comments now.
Sure.
Someone said, "Why would you want to stay where you're only 3/4 of a human in their books. So we could never receive equal treatment. We keep begging for what our ancestors died for. And then someone commented because they still made a deal, I guess regarding the Indians, they still made a deal with them and they never totally separated. So someone said, that won't fix it. Look at the Indians. So this person's response was, yeah, but they made a deal to separate with
Yeah.
them and they never separated. So here's my question. Okay, you don't have any kids in school. I don't have any kids in school anymore. Well, yeah.
Right.
So taxes are coming out of my money for education. I don't have a problem with that because that's helpful. It's okay. I'm paying tax. It's not a big deal. So let's talk about reparations. So if you were told, and be honest, if you were told that whether your Social Security, your disability, your retirement fund, whatever it is you're getting now, if you would have to contribute, let's say, an additional $50 a month or whatever, and that goes towards reparation, how would you feel about that?
I really don't see. We're going to open up a can of worms here, okay?
No, we're being honest.
Okay, I don't see that reparations are going to do any good at this point because, and I think the money would be much better spent if you're talking about an extra $50 a month, and I would be willing to pay that in order to better fund schools, better fund training programs, better fund diversity programs, for the folks that are here today, as opposed to reparations, which. If there were going to be reparations, and if it was in the era immediately after the Civil War, where all the black folks that were around during the Civil War were still alive and could get direct benefit from that, I would favor that. But I think
okay, Mark, I gotta jump in on you right now. I'm gonna rip you apart right now. I'm gonna rip you apart right now in a respectful way.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay. When you create wealth and you die, let's say Walmart, let's say Donald Trump, when he dies, his money goes to his kids. Right. So just because he made the money. So when you have people here who has built this country, okay, who wasn't asked to come over here and built this country, and all there's people who were in Vietnam, and they come here, they get some sort of something, they get something that they get. You have the Jewish people because of what happened in Germany. Right. They had received their form of reparation, the Indians their form of reparations. I don't understand why, because I hear people say that, because we can agree to disagree. I don't understand how people don't see that reparations, whether it's my great-great-great-grandmother, I am still related to her. I'm still related to her blood, sweat, and tears. So I don't, and her, the whatever happened to her, whether it was the ring and all that kind of stuff. I don't understand why. For you, because we're talking, I don't understand why reparations would kind of help be a good thing for people, because I don't trust, you want to put the money here and put the money there. Whoever's in charge of that money has the say so on what to do with that money, as opposed to, because now I would maybe kind of understand what you're saying. If this wasn't a long line that was being done, the Indians, the Jewish community, then I could say, oh, well, maybe. But this is something that has happened. So I don't understand why we're even having conversations about reparation when reparation was given to the Jewish community and all other communities.
Are you talking about the Jewish folks getting reparations in Germany after the war, that kind of thing? Is that what you're referring to?
When they come to the United States, there's certain things that they get, especially living in New York, we see that. And the Jewish people have citizenship here and in Israel, things like that. I hear people say, go back to Africa. I don't know Africa. This is where I am,
So, it'd be like saying, go back to Scotland for me, or
exactly.
I don't know. Yeah.
You
Uh,
know,
no, I understand what you're saying. I guess maybe, and you know, you talked about Jewish folks coming to the U.S. being given a break or incentives. I think that would be appropriate, not maybe directly reparations. I guess it depends on your definition of reparations, but you know, giving them
give
the
me my 40
opportunity.
acres and a mule. Give me my 40 acres and a mule. Because
And
think
mhm,
about this,
mhm,
Mark. This is,
mhm.
I think, why
Okay,
people
okay.
are talking about reparation. We came here. We built the Whitneys when they had the cotton fields. We did that. We were in the field.
No argument. No
So it's
argument.
different where, you know, another community, and I respect all communities, but excuse me, they were in another country and they came here for solace, for help me, thank God, safe refuge, where that's
Mhm,
what happens
mhm.
in our community.